Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. How are we?
It's been a week, but I'm glad that it's Friday, and I'm glad we're here doing Experience Friday Live.
Totally. It's
Yeah,
good, and I'm super excited to get to talk to Taylor today. I think he
yes,
brings
yes,
such an interesting point of view. So
yeah,
everybody listening, y'all are lucky today.
yeah, very lucky. Well, big things here, Michael. Why, again, do we do Experience Friday Live, and why does experience really matter to us?
So, in honor of Taylor, our guest, I'm going to approach this from a engineering perspective of it's all about systems, right? And businesses are systems. Bigger businesses are multi-systems, all having to work together. And within systems, we can ask Taylor more about this later, but there's friction. There's places that are running smoothly and less smoothly, and things that are complicated by humans. And so if you look at experience from the perspective of an ecosystem, you have a much better shot at understanding how businesses can be successful, both from the revenue side, the profit side, and also just the human side. And there's so much happening in that today. So experience matters. It affects people's lives and it changes businesses. Just how will they do? So excited about the conversation. Please put a lot of good stuff in the chat, everybody. We are watching, and if you have questions for Taylor or want to add to the conversation, check in with us, and we'll put you up.
Well, absolutely. Well, thank you, Michael, so much for that. Just want to make a couple of announcements. First off, hello to everyone on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube watching this. And if you're not watching it live, you may be watching it afterwards. So really excited to have everybody here. Again, I'm Shawn Nason, Michael Harper. We're part of a boutique consulting firm called Mofi. And we're here every Friday. Now, next Friday, Michael, I think we're taking off for Thanksgiving, unless we decide to do a surprise show, which you never know with us. We might do. But don't want to miss out on a couple big of announcements. Next week on the podcast of Combustion Chronicles, creating rock star experiences with James Dodkins. This is an awesome podcast next week. And then 2 weeks, we are really honored to have Todd Unger coming, the Chief Experience Officer and Senior Vice President of Marketing and Member Experience for the American Medical Association. And so, I think we need to jump in today, Michael, because we have a very, very dear friend of ours, Taylor Carr, who currently serves as the Director of Experience and Innovation at Quest Diagnostics, where he combines his engineering background, you'll hear us talking a lot about that with Taylor, with his passion for human-centered design to create and advocate for a people-first system. And he and his amazing wife and daughter never miss an opportunity to load up the camper, and we'll have him talk more about that, to get out and enjoy the detached, simple life of the great outdoors. So let's welcome Taylor to the stage with us.
What's up? Hey, guys. Good to see you.
Yeah, and we didn't even get really into detail there, Taylor, but a sprinter, and I've seen what those are like, and so kudos to you guys. I'm sure you probably maybe even doing something wild and crazy around Thanksgiving with it, knowing you guys. So, well, it's awesome to have you here with us, Taylor. A matter of fact, you've got some friends. Look at this. Kat says hello to you, Taylor. So to all of us. But, Taylor, can you tell us, how does a person with an engineering background end up in patient experience, member experience, or just customer experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, even healthcare, when I was going to school as becoming a manufacturing engineer, somebody said in 10 years, you'd be working in a healthcare organization with laboratory diagnostic testing. I would not have bridged that gap. So it's a fascinating story. I think if you break it down, I always had challenges with bridging that gap on telling stories about business problems we were trying to solve, and sharing engineering-based examples of how to solve those business problems always left me with pitfalls. And so the human-centered design approach allowed for wrapping stories around those problems and sharing those problems as related to who is affected, the humans that are affected with those problems. And so it just became another tool in my tool chest of engineering methods to solve those business problems. And it's worked out really well. So I can still use my engineering base to uncover all the details and then tell those problems in a way that's very human-centered.
Well, and I think, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
I will say, if you are a person listening who has those inclinations or wants to add more numbers to what you do, Taylor is the person to reach out to. It always cracks us up, Taylor, when when we're like, just ask a question, and you're like, no, let's do a spreadsheet, and it needs to have this on it with this scale, and you code it this way, and you get everybody's responses, and then pop, all of a sudden there's this answer. They were like, oh, yeah, you can prove that that's right because you showed this data. And we're like, good, move on.
Yeah.
So
well,
it's a really interesting approach. Yeah.
Well, it's a good example to, like, within a small group of, kind of statistical or engineering minded individuals, numbers individuals, like with your finance background, Shawn, those things bridge that gap. But bringing that to, others in the organization that are trying to run an operational line or operational end of the business, those details tend to not tell that story.
Well, and so let's dig a little deeper, because you did start to go there a little bit, Taylor, but I really want to ask this, because this background, and we've talked, I have a finance background, you have a statistical background, which is even more wild, right? How does that really play out in your mission to create better experiences for people? Because you're passionate about it, and I love that you actually talk about human-centered design as another engineering process, right? Because I think people talk about human-centered design, or for people in the business world also hear talked about as design thinking. They think about it as fluff.
Yeah.
This fluffy thing. And when we started, working with Quest, there were some people that were naysayers to this because it seemed to be fluff to them. And what you did is you built it in and said, no, this is really a system. This is really something that's there. So how does that affect those experiences in your mind?
Yeah, it allowed, I think, I could bring those that had an engineering scientific background, which is wonderful. You need that in the space that I work in. And it provided that gap that we needed to be filled, because the department I work in at Quest is very customer and human based. And the best example, and I think you guys were a part of this event too, where a customer said outright, stop flattening my humanity. And I think a lot of that was when we approach business problems in the corporate world, we tend to put things on a slide. We tend to put people into a spreadsheet, this two-dimensional thing that doesn't come to life well. And so a lot of the work with human-centered design is trying to add dimension to all too often what is flat in what's conveyed to other leaders within an organization, and trying to share those problems that need to be solved.
I actually forgot about that moment, but that is such a brilliant way of putting it, is quit flattening me being human, right?
Yeah. I'm not a number. I'm not a number. Like, don't just have me be a number in a spreadsheet. I think all too often there's a point in business that's necessary, right? Where you've got to be able to show the overall view of how systems are linking together. But there's also a need to make sure we share the details of who those people are that are being potentially flattened in those means and modes of communication.
Yeah. So I want to dive into this because we found this quote. Michael found this brilliant quote that screams Taylor Carr. We tell people to, just as a little disclaimer here on the show, like, this is reality. This is a live show. So Taylor was talking about, hey, I have nothing on my walls. Taylor just moved.
Yeah.
My wife is in the hospital, so I have a 6-year-old who just screamed for a second. So, and I think Michael had sirens going by his house. That's what live media is like, right? So, but there's this quote, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Michael, because I think this is brilliant. And this does scream totally Taylor.
Yeah, we found this and actually went out on social media this week. And as I was getting the slide ready for social media, I texted it to Taylor because I'm like, oh my gosh, if this does not encapsulate everything we ever talk about, when we're talking about solving all the world's experience problems, right? So when user experience doesn't consider all users, shouldn't be known as some user experience or sucks.
Yeah.
Because it does suck.
It does.
If we're not considering all the voices. And I do think that's one of the things that we've seen shifting in the past few years, that there used to be a time where you could just go after a segment and build for that segment. And now, maybe not just a few years, but 5-10 years, through being spoiled by Amazon and others, people expect unique, customized, or at least apparent or feels like customized experience, even if they're not truly customized to a person. So when you see that, and when I first shared it, what's your first gut reaction when you read that quote?
It hits so close to home. It's I think so much of solving business problems, especially in the early days of my use of human-centered design, is exactly how you said it, where it's like, you may have a set of personas, but it's like, let's just go after Donna's persona, and it's just because you're trying to simplify the problem for things that tend to be complex. And we only have so much capital that we can use when it comes to solving these problems too. And so you make trade-offs, and there's, considerations that happen. And with that, you get sucky experiences. I mean, that's just the nature and reality of it. And so I think when we started working together on long-term strategy conversations, and when we brought together some Gen Xers and baby boomers and started talking to them, that was really when I think it highlighted, in my perspective, is it's less about focusing on maybe the middle experience, and you have to focus on the ends. Because if you can focus on and meet the two ends of the customers that you may be interacting with, you most likely can span those that are in the middle. So it's very important to take into account multiple personas across the journey. I mean, one example, I was just traveling to some of our sites this week. We have some Gen Xers that are brand new to the organization, with outcome of the COVID pandemic and retention and hiring. And many of them don't know how to use tabbed browsers. And a lot of our employee experiences is based in tab browser capabilities, right? They're generation of smartphones and tablets, and there are somewhat tabs on the Android or iOS, ecosystem, but it's very fascinating how these little aspects of experiences and technology and how systems are designed and come together, how they can lead to terrible experiences.
And we're talking both about the digital user experience and the in-person user experience, and you have to navigate both. But that is super interesting, because you would assume that technology simplifies things, right? And that's really not the case. I was joking the other day that what is it, 8 times out of 10 when we're working with clients, Shawn, the big bold solution is, let's build an app. And it's like,
right.
Oh,
yeah, pause.
No app rules. App can be a tool that helps you, but that's not the big bold solution. And so once technology plays in it, it just complicates it in so many ways for the end user. So how do you navigate the technology side?
Yeah, I think it's going back to the being mindful of the two ends. I mean, we have some digital immigrants that are coming up about more often and prominently, especially with their grandkids becoming so accustomed to it, and a little bit of a hand holding along the way that's happening. I mean, I've seen it, I know, with my mother. She's become very accustomed to the iOS ecosystem. So I think that's been helpful over time. But it's also, you have to be mindful that there's always going to be a segment that just does not want to partake in that. And those individuals can't be ignored. And that may not be directly related to the technology itself. They may physically not be able to. Like I've got a family member that's in a wheelchair and doesn't have full use of, their hands. And so there's other aspects to designing for experiences that need to take into account just segments that just cannot interact with, digital capabilities.
Yeah. So I want to, again, I think that's a good point to dive into here. Because again, Michael said it, probably 8 out of 10. Let's go build an app. That'll solve the problem.
Yeah.
Doesn't solve the problem. And we all have a dear friend, Taylor, Shawn Slavinsky, who says how to figure out how to be high touch and high tech at the same time, right?
Absolutely.
And that technology is the tool, not the solution. And that's a big mindset. And we talked a ton about mindsets and heart sets. So, how do these mindsets of human-centered design play into this focus on the hearts and voices of all users? Like, in your opinion, how does that happen? Because we've worked with you for almost 3 years now in a lot of areas where we've seen this come about.
Yeah. I think so the first thing I mentioned is like being able to tell stories, right? Like we can all come up with engineering problems, but the second one that, especially being an engineer, I mean, I tend to be more introverted. I mean, that may not come out in the business environment. Like I have to be extroverted to get that level of excitement, but being vulnerable, I think with human-centered design and mindsets, it's being able to go to that place with somebody that you don't know, customers, patients, and asking them and looking for insights about what they are experiencing. And there are emotional touching moments. And so much, I think our hearts and minds that traditionally in business is leave that at the door. Like those things aren't a part, sentiment is not part of customer experience. And I think we're missing a lot of opportunity to connect and build experiences for our customers when that's not taken into account. And you leverage that on a day-to-day basis when you are interacting with employees, coworkers, and customers.
And tell me if this is bad for calling you out, but one of my favorite moments with you was when you got relatively upset over the word failure, that you had really leaned into the, fail fast, fail cheap, and that failure is a part of the learning experience, and that I won't go into detail, but you were trying to get more people to embrace the spirit of failing. Can you just talk a little bit about how you've seen that mindset of being okay with failure, embracing failure as a positive thing has played into your work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so much of this is cultural based at the organization I work in, because failure in its own right is a really, really terrible when it comes to, diagnostic testing. Like that's not something, we want to be a part of and participate in. It's providing spaces for people to be okay with basically taking actions. And sometimes those actions, produce outcomes that are unexpected, which is a failure. And so I think if you frame it up in that way and creating basically these spaces for people to be comfortable and vulnerable, right? Because that's an element of vulnerability, is being able to act in the face of ambiguity at the risk of failing. And once we've done it a few times with people, and there's some hand holding and encouraging and partnership,
tears, gnashing of teeth.
It comes about and it becomes infectious, because people recognize, oh, wow, look at the progress that's being made. Look at what this group is able to accomplish. Look at what they're learning. Look at what they're finding. Look at how fast they're learning and finding these things. Well, that came from a willingness and a mindset to be vulnerable and embrace failure as an aspect of learning.
I think that's incredible, and I hope people are listening to that, because I do think that's the key to it, and we laugh and giggle a little bit, but I remember those moments too, and I remember getting out on early morning walks when we first started with the organization with some people, because they had to talk through things and they had to understand. And I remember the first time going with one of the executives to visit some sites and being asked, well, what is it that you look at And when I started talking about the things that I looked at within a facility, which wasn't really operational,
Right.
it was that aha moment of, oh my gosh, this is that beautiful mixture of systems and processes and that engineering that, and I think that's even my biggest nugget, even today, learning from you again, is to go that human-centered design is a process. It is a system, and it works well. And all the other stuff just adds to it so brilliantly. So, most important and excited is I love the fact that we're still working together, and we're going to see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Working on a project. But I want you to give us your opinion on this. What experience trends do we need to be paying attention to for 2022 and beyond, in your opinion? What do you think out there?
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 years when COVID came and the pandemic, it's, I think, forced a lot of our hands when it comes to, embracing the digital space. And so as technology around the digital continues to expand, is not leaving customers behind, in keeping things as simple as we possibly can. One challenge we're trying to solve within the organization is being, leaders within an organization. We tend to all be planners, but there's a segment of our industry that does not plan. And so as we start to move towards a planning world, right, COVID has really forced us, right? We're scheduling and, preparing our days to make sure that we're producing the best outcomes and getting the services we need. Not all of our customers do that, so we can't leave them behind. And so 2022 is really about preparation, continuing to helping our customers prepare, and making sure that along the way that nobody's left behind.
I love it. Like that's one we haven't heard, and that I can see mine and Michael's wheels are both turning. Like, gonna jot notes around that. Well, Taylor, it is so awesome to have you here, and you're a friend of ours, and I appreciate your vulnerability and coming on here and saying, here's where we're at, here's what we're working on within the organization, and an organization within Quest that is really wanting to do what's right, and acknowledging that there's work to be done there. So thank you for that. We're going to ask that you just kind of hang out in the green room while Michael and I close up, and then we'll close up with you. But thank you again for Michael and I both. So,
yeah, thank you guys. As always, so great to see you guys.
Awesome. Well, let's not forget, if you want to reach out to Michael or I, you can go to mofi.co and reach out to us, or to ShawnNason.com. Most importantly, you can send us an email at hello@mofi.co. As I mentioned earlier, don't forget our podcast, The Combustion Chronicles. This whole season 5 has been around experience and the experience ecosystem with some amazing people. And we're closing out the next couple weeks with that season, and really excited for season 6. It's going to be something so different than what we've done before with the Combustion Chronicles. As well, connect with Michael and I on LinkedIn, and you can connect with Taylor there too. Go out there if you have questions for him. But most importantly for us is that if you play in this experience ecosystem, like we were just talking about with Taylor at Quest, we want you. We want you on the show. We want to talk about the great things, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's happening in experience. And Michael, because we won't get to say this to everybody next week, I have to just say Happy Thanksgiving from Shawn and Michael. And that we hope everyone has an amazing week next week with friends, family, whoever you're with. And like I said, there might be a surprise live show pop up on Friday. You just never know. And Michael, I know for you and I this weekend, we have some big football games. Well, you had yours last night. I have a big football game tomorrow in college football. So we're closing out the college football season. So have a great weekend, Michael, and we will talk later.
Take care.
Awesome.